Back on the Rob Dibble Show with Ben Darnell in your afternoon drive. This is one of my favorite people, especially when I played in the major leagues. Every time I saw him, it was like Christmas. It was like Santa Claus. He's bringing toys. And Chuck Shupp, 35 years with Louisville Slugger. Almost every homestand in Cincinnati, he was there, even on the road. Then he retired. Then he went to Marucci. Now he's with Chandler Bats. And besides the obvious, you make a lot of bats for major leaguers. Two of your biggest clients are Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani. We welcome Chuck Shupp to the Rob Dibble Show with Ben Darnell. Chuck, how are you?
Dibs, it's a pleasure to talk to you, my friend, always. Great. I'm doing great.
Ben and I were talking off the air, and he actually brought this up. So when you got into, how did you even get into the bat industry? And then I was thinking, how do you match up bats to players from spring training, or when do you start saying this might be a good bat for you to use and try to help some young player's career?
So I started with Louisville Slugger in 1979, and that was basically my entry level into the company. I was doing stuff with slow pitch softball, Little League baseball. And then like in 82, they brought me to the pro baseball to kind of help do order entry, the detail work behind the scenes. In 84, 85 is when they basically put me out front, and I was in charge of all the pro sales. So I was probably 25, 26, I guess, at that point, and started doing the journeys into the clubhouses and, started building my relationships over time. And obviously you saw me a bunch because Cincinnati is like an hour and 20 minutes away there all the time. And, part of the job on matching up product to player is most of the guys have somewhat of an idea what they want to use. They're just not locked in sometimes. And you've seen that during your playing careers. Guys like a guy like Larkin, he never changed. He knew what he wanted. Ken Griffey Jr., same thing. Those guys were easy. The ones that were a challenge were the guys that were always fidgety, couldn't figure out what's comfortable. They overthink it sometimes. And you had a few of those as teammates, too.
Who were they? Who were they?
Comes to mind, Ray Knight. I think you played with him, right?
Yeah, I did. And then he coached me, too. So
he literally, Dibs, he would open every box that came in there, every one of them, and try and, let me see that bat, let me see this bat. I go, dude, just pick one and work with this. I said, you're going to make yourself nuts because there's too many things out there that you're just going to confuse. It's hard enough to hit when you pick one bat, much less when you got five to pick from. So part of my job was to try to calm people down sometimes and just let them figure it out. And the more I did the job, a lot of the players would help me. In your case with Larkin or whoever, they get a young guy, they sit down and talk to him and try to mentor them to say, look, you need to make a selection here, whether it's Slugger or whoever it is at that time as far as what you're using, and use it. And, I was one of those kind of people. I wanted the player to be happy. I hope it was with Slugger at that point. But the point is, pick something you like and stick with it. Don't move around. And, it's a journey for all these guys. Everybody is, even now, although players aren't quite as bad because they played with so much wood and travel ball, which I don't think when you were 12 or 13 you played travel ball. You played other sports during the...
Just Babe Ruth, junior high school. And I coach 16U travel ball, and we play a lot of wood bat tournaments.
Yeah. So guys show up now in pro ball having a pretty good idea what they want versus back in the day they probably didn't do that. So that part of it gets a little more simplistic with dealing with guys. But the whole fact of you're still going to fail a lot, what's comfortable to you, what works, that whole dynamic is still part of what I deal with every day when I see a team or a player, talk to a player.
Tell us about the evolution and how it's been since you started back in the late 70s to the 80s to now, and how much that when you were saying players help you guys, how much did players give you, like, I want this, I need this, I'm looking for that, where you guys use that information to evolve your techniques and everything that you're doing when you're making the bat? So
when I first started, maple didn't exist. Nobody ever used it. Nobody talked about it. Ash was probably 98%. I mean, there might have been a small fraction of guys left that were still using hickory. But honestly, hickory is a wood that's so hard, I'm not sure it made a good bat because there was no ball reaction off this stuff. You couldn't break it, but the whole point of the bat is to transfer the energy, and it did not do a good job of that. So when I first started, it was all ash, which is a little bit harder to deal with because compared to maple, ash is softer. And, guys would want like a 34 and a half inch, 31 ounces, which is really light piece of wood. It's not going to hold up a lot of times to, a 200-mile-an-hour collision. So I had to fight that battle of guys thinking, well, I didn't get good wood. Junior gets the good wood. I don't get it. That kind of conversation happened all the time. And then the other evolution was the barrel size of the bats of guys that played college baseball and used big barrel aluminum, come in the pro ball, want to do the same thing, which is you can't make that transition straight across. You got to make some adjustments. So the way I would try to help a guy is I said, don't speak in terms, you can't give me absolutes in. Give me model numbers. Say a C243 barrel and an I-13 handle. Give me some things I can work with here that I can make you a sample, bring it to you, and see if it works.
Let me stop you. Explain that in layman's terms to our audience. What are you talking about the because I know the handles, some of them have knobs, some of them don't. Explain everything.
So what I'm saying is, like, instead of saying, hey, I want a big barrel bat, which is very, convoluted, every bottle we make or anybody makes has a number on it, and that tells you what's the specs of the barrel and the handle and all that's going to be. So if you tell me, give me a C243 barrel, I know exactly what you're talking about. The factory knows what you're talking about. And you might say, put a R43 handle on it. And all of these bats, the numbers come from, originally it was made from the player who the model was created for. C243 was Rod Carew. So C271 has been around for a long time. So all of those models originally were built for one guy. And then we can combine models and make new models all the time, which we did. And so that way, instead of saying I want a big barrel thin handle, I can go back to the factory and say I want a C243, which is a big barrel, a C271, which is a smaller handle with a flare knob. And there's so many nuances in a wood bat that you can create that literally even saying a flared knob could have 4 different variations to it. So it's a very complex question to answer sometimes for a player to say, this feels good to me. And the challenge for the player even is to find that right mix where they settle into it, they don't change anymore, and it's just a lot easier for them to be happy with that point.
Talking to Chuck Shupp, Chandler Bats. We've been talking so much about this stupid torpedo bat. It's making Rob so mad. Rob's been explaining to us, listen, man, it's not the bat, it's the person who's wielding the bat. But speaking of this, new fad, tell us how new of a fad it is to you when you hear about a barrel being moved around on a bat.
The first time we really encountered people wanting us to do this was spring training, not this year, but last year. The Yankees had hired an engineering professor from MIT to come in. He basically was going to do statistical studies for the players on where they hit the ball on the bat, their exit velocity, all that stuff, and it kind of evolved into him. They're coming up with, okay, you make contact on this certain part of the bat 98% of the time. And so they asked us, or whichever company the player was using, can you build a bat with the barrel to look like this? And they give us a set of specifications. I mean, you guys have seen pictures of the torpedo bat, I'm sure, because it's been all over the
I had a local company make me one. They've made me one. So it looks like a bowling pin. Yep. And that barrel moves depending on depending on the player the bat's made for. So that's the theory. Now, in actuality,
Dibs, we both know the guy doesn't hit the ball in the same spot of the bat consistently a whole lot unless you're a Hall of Fame player. It just doesn't happen. Getting back to what you said, it's not the one, it's the magician. It's always going to be the player. I think this bat will have some use for some guys, but I don't think it's going to revolutionize the game of baseball. It's not going to make a 220 hitter a 270 hitter. You know, I have concerns as the first time I walked in the clubhouse after all this blow-up, I went to see the Giants up in Cincinnati. And Mike Yastrzemski and Willie Adames, a couple guys, just asked me, "What do you think of this, Chuck?" So we started talking about it, and they're all smart enough to know. He goes, "Is this going to make a difference?" I said, "I don't think so. You guys have a model you like. I wouldn't change." So I don't think those kind of guys are going to change. I think some guys who are still searching probably will take a look at it. But here's the thing from your perspective, Dibs, as a former pitcher. You've seen that model. So the throat area is a lot skinnier than most bats. Okay? So that, to me, is a target area for you where if the guy's trying to square it up, he can only do what he can do if you can get coming on his hands. Also, the end of the bat's tapered to if you hit a ball, say you fool the guy, it's on the outside of the corner, and he tries to hit a flare over third base or whatever, with that end tapered like a bottom of a bowling pin cannot even happen. So I think there's pluses and minuses to this. I think the Dodgers had a big weekend with one ball club, and I keep telling people, give this 50 games and let's see what happens with guys using it. Because we have sold a lot of samples to almost every team, but whether they reorder or not is another story. So nobody knows the answer to that yet. None of the companies do. You get a lot of requests for samples, and that's kind of where we are on this right now. It's been crazy the last 3 days on teams sending in orders for guys.
All right, so now you make bats, and you and I were talking, what was this, 2 years ago when you were trying to get Shohei Ohtani to sign with your company. Describe that and describe, what makes him tick and trying to get a bat that could perform to his specifications because he's so big, so strong. And aren't you trying to get these bats to survive another at bat? And it's not just, one at bat per bat. You want, like I was describing Gary Sheffield, my teammate with the Marlins, had 20 dozen bats and he'd pick 6 to play with. He was insane when it came to the right bat. It describe mentally how these guys love and treat their bats, and it's an extension of them.
I think what you said is 100%. Guys will find gamers. That's Chef did. And I also, 2 days ago, I did Brett Boone's podcast, and he was the same kind of guy. He would order 30 dozen bats in a season, and he would go through a dozen bats and pick out maybe 3 or 4 that are gamers. The rest of them he'd use for batting practice or give to somebody else. Those guys, they would pick certain bats. They wouldn't even hit with them until they went to the plate during the game. In Ohtani's case, it was really difficult because he was already in Japan. I'm communicating to him through the interpreter, who's no longer in the picture, Ippei. And he would send me these huge text messages of 9 different models he wants made. When he would take the same barrel and change the taper points, the handle sizes. So we'd have to make samples of those, send them to Japan, and I'd just wait and see what he came back with and said, okay, can you change this? Can you do that? We did some Zoom calls the same fashion when he was still over there. And then when I first met him face-to-face in January 23 with the Angels, we sat down and talked about what he wanted, and we pretty much had him dialed in. He's very meticulous, Dibs. I've never seen anybody prepare like him. He doesn't waste any energy. He doesn't take a lot of swings in the cage he doesn't need to take. His purpose is to achieve each step of the process to get ready. At that point, he was pitching and hitting at the same time, so he had to really segment his time to be efficient. But his methodical approach to me really made me even look at what I do differently. But I also appreciate what he did because it wasn't conjecture. He had thought all this stuff through. I mean, he doesn't do anything by happenstance. He plans everything out. And he once he got to his model, he doesn't change. He might change it a half an ounce during the year, but you've seen guys do that when they get tired, maybe in late the season. But the model never changes. It stays the same. And it's been a really fun ride with him, obviously. I mean, he's every day does something nobody else has done. And he's a good guy. He's easy to work with. Just a pleasure to be around.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Is there a common denominator of all these guys over all the years? Is there a common denominator maybe in their personality or the bat choice or something in a bat for the home run hitter, not the guy that's punching out, singles left and right, but the home run slugger? Is there a common denominator that you have found over the decades that you've been doing this?
If I had to pick one thing, I would say a mental calmness. I know that's not something you can grab with your hands, but it's something a player has. They don't fret over stuff. They know what they want. They go to work it's just amazing. And I'm going to use a player's name who wasn't a home run hitter, but he was way ahead of everybody else, was Tony Gwynn. He was one of the best hitters ever take a breath, but he studied how to hit and what to do to accomplish that. And I think all the guys, the big boppers, they all really, when I start thinking in my mind who used slugger, were reaching out, most of those guys never changed. They picked one model. They knew if something was going wrong, it's mechanical. There wasn't anything else. And they found it out what it was. So I think there's a determination, a mental calmness, a self-confidence. We all have bouts of self-doubt, whether it's personal, professional. Hitters have it, pitchers have it. But these guys really would sort through that pretty quick and put it out of their mind because you got to play every day, so whatever happened last night doesn't count. You can't think about it. And I just think these guys, they were dialed in, whether it was Sammy Sosa in the day or Bonds, all those guys always stay with the same thing. They always approach it the same way. And I just, all those guys just had that it factor you look for in somebody that's going to excel at what they do.
Talking to Chuck Shupp from Chandler Bats, I do regret never getting to the Louisville Slugger factory and going through it because I'm big on history and stuff like that. So do they keep some of the old bats? Like what's the oldest? What are some of the coolest things you got to see working there? And describe like a Dick Allen bat or something that was so ridiculous, like Babe Ruth's model. I mean, some of these bats that go back 100+ years. Yeah. I mean, what are some of the cool things that you've seen over your tenure?
Well, back in the day, they had a model of every model in the factory stored somewhere, and there wasn't computers. So when they made the bat, they would pull that out of the storage, put it behind the hand turner, and he would take hand calipers and go from that model down to the bat he was making by hand. And Dibs, they still have a part of the museum now. You can walk into this model room. I mean, every model it's everything. That's the history of our company. Babe Ruth's original model was in there. Lou Gehrig's is in there.
Awesome.
It just absorbs history with all the different guys we made stuff for. And they have interactive displays where they let you hold one of the bats and stuff like that. But it really, to me, it was an awe-inspiring thing of the history of how many guys have swung slugger in their careers. And how the bat changed so much over the years, but the player's mentality still is one of trying to find the perfect fit for each player. And Slugger did a great job with that, and it was really difficult for the guys then because you're hand turning a bat. There was not quite as much consistency because the computer's not doing it. And I mean, if you ever get a chance to come through Louisville, we need to go see it. I mean, right. It really, you can walk right through the middle of the factory, see all the processes. The museum has a lot of really cool displays of individual players and also stuff like what Louisville Slugger did during World War II. They made gun stocks during the World War II. And things
what?
That yeah,
awesome.
People, yeah, I know.
What gun?
People don't even people. Yeah, I mean, it was like
the M1 or something
rifle.
Yeah,
30 carbine rifle. They made the stocks. They modified the machinery for the war effort and made gun stocks.
Did they put their label on it?
That's awesome.
Can you imagine if they put the Louisville Slugger just
so
little
cool.
in the corner or something?
So I mean, there's just all those little things like that.
Oh man, that's awesome.
All right, stupid question. Where does the wood come from these days? Where are we getting our bat wood from?
Not too far from you guys. A lot of stuff's upstate New York. A lot of the companies get the same areas because the weather there grows excellent. It just grows. The trees grow good there, and wood is like every other thing that grows. You have to harvest it every year. So, New York and Pennsylvania, some parts of Connecticut have been the go-to since baseball started. It's never changed. And all the timber mills are up in those areas, where they cut the trees, cut them up. They dry them up there a lot of times, and they ship them to the respective factories. And maple's the same way. Maple's all grown in that area. That's just a wonderful part of the country to get resources from, and it's never changed. It's never wavered. So that's pretty neat, pretty unique in itself. That most of everything you ever see makes its way to the big leagues. It comes from that area.
We're kind of tight on time. We got a little bit more time, but we're with Chuck Shupp from Chandler Bats, and I love talking about this stuff. Let's go back to Aaron Judge for a second. Huge guy. Was he 6'7",
yep.
like 260, 270? He reminds me of Frank Howard. When did you first start with him? And how many bats? I like statistics. Like how many bats will he break in a season? How many home runs when he was hitting 60 plus home runs? How many did he hit with one particular bat? And do you go back and maybe even look at it after it breaks and go, this was an unbelievable bat?
He really doesn't go through a lot. I mean, he orders probably your typical amount, probably 6 to 8 dozen in the season, and he like everybody else will pick a bat out of the box, several hopefully that he feels comfortable with, and use those in the game. But he never really was going through a lot of inventory. And the first time I met him was his first spring training with the Yankees. And I remember the first time I met him. I mean, he's huge, and he is the same person now that he was then. He's a gentleman. He looks you right in the eye, shakes your hand. I mean, one of those people you were excited to deal with because there was no attitude. He was just there to get better. And he's never changed one lick to this day. And that, to me, is a big leaguer in the way he handles himself. But he really is pretty low maintenance. The same way with Ohtani. Ohtani's a big boy. He's 6'3" or 6'4", 230.
Yeah.
Runs like the wind, like Judge does. I mean, these guys...
They're freaks,
I mean, they're
man.
an anomaly.
Yep, they're freaks.
They are. I mean, Ohtani gets mad. I remember when he was with the Angels, I was talking to the coaches, and he'd get mad. The games he would pitch in, he still wanted to run the bases and steal bases. And it drove the coaches nuts because obviously you don't want to get hurt doing that stuff. And, he came in the game one day. He was mad because they didn't send him. And so they're trying to figure out what to tell him to appease him, and they were talking about the pitcher's move was too good. He goes, "No, it's not. I've studied that guy. The reason you didn't send me is because of the catcher." And they all just stood there like, "Oh my God." This guy studies everybody out there, so he knew what the guy's release time was, the second base, and all that kind of stuff. So they're very much a student of the game, very much.
You are the best, sir. Thank you so much for talking torpedo bats with us and all the other stuff. But all the other stuff is way more fascinating.
So true.
We got to get you back on because I love the ins and outs of bats. Going to the Cooperstown and seeing Ty Cobb's bats to Babe Ruth. Everybody's different. It's fascinating to me, and having to try to I mean, to me, Chuck, I was trying to hurt your business. I was trying to break their bats. So,
I know you were.
I wasn't as good as Danny. I wasn't as good as Danny Jackson at breaking them, though. Danny was the best. That guy was ridiculous.
Yeah, but you were. I always look forward to seeing you, man. It was a lot of fun. You know, it was always. I will tell you this, my friend, and this is the God's honest truth. Your generation of player had a lot more personality as far as clubhouse, you know, than some of these teams. And they're good kids today. They're just everybody's chilled. Everybody's got their headphones on. You know, they're not. Back in the day with Danny Jackson and you never knew what was going to happen to some of the guys you had, especially with the Reds teammates. It was interesting.
But you were one of us. That's the thing. You were family. So once you're in that family, man, you got to watch it.
I know.
We love you,
awesome.
man.
I love you guys. So I appreciate. Anytime you want me, just text me. I'll get on the show with you guys.
I will, Chuck. Thank you, man.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Chuck Shupp, everybody. Chandler Bats. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. I don't think we can do first dibs, can we?
We're probably running late.
We're running a little bit late. We'll catch up in the break. We'll be right back.